Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. This is your host, I'm Levi Stevenson, and we are here this week. But I took a week off last week, and it's February. Not a lot's happening in football, but what we are going to do though is start digging into the 2027 recruiting class and everything going on with that. So, well, if we have a little bit of time, we'll talk about Dom Orange, about his comments from the NFL Combine today. He had his interview today. Just 1 second here. I'm just made sounds just a touch weird for some reason. Let's see. Okay. Does my voice, like, does my audio sound okay? People in the chat, please let me know if my audio sounds okay. It sounds a little weird in my headphones. But today we are going to dig into recruiting, like I said, just go over offers and stuff like that. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds as far as getting into tape and anything just yet, because we're really early in the class. And you know, it's hard to sell because some of these offers and everything too are going to be to guys that are already at other schools. So the staff is building this class essentially completely from scratch. I would say there's no long, the last staff obviously had an offer list already compiled, and these guys have had to completely restart. They were, and I would say was in on some high level recruits for the 2027 class before, obviously before the coaching change. They had, they were in on actually really couple big recruits. Now, granted, you had guys like Mylan Paris and all those guys had already flipped. But then you had a guy like Israel Abrams. I think he's still a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the class. That was, a big Iowa State target for a while. And there was a thought that he was going to be able to come to Iowa State. But obviously that's not where they're at. So, but we're going to go through the offer list here. And I think there's some patterns that are worth pointing out on some of this, because, they've clearly kind of identified where they start want to, we can see the difference in recruiting areas based on what we've on the where these guys are coming from compared to the last staff. Because obviously the last staff prioritized the 6-hour radius around Ames. So that, that's up into Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas City, Nebraska. And, but then obviously the staff had tons and tons of Ohio connections. So they got guys from Ohio, and then, like Taylor Mauser's from Arizona. So they were getting guys from Arizona. We did not see them though go after a ton of guys out of Texas. I mean, they got some out of Florida, but not a ton. A few out of Florida, very few guys came out of Texas. But otherwise, for the most part, the South was pretty much out of play for Iowa State. I mean, there's so many recruits in Florida and Texas that, like, you're just gonna get a couple of those guys per class, just no matter what, pretty much. But, we didn't really see Iowa State go after guys in most of the South for a while. But that has started to change a little bit. So let's take a look, and we're just going to really start from the top and just kind of go through here. Now, and remember, these are all offers. How serious of a prospect these guys are, it's hard to say. But I do want to go through it. I think it's worth pointing out where a lot of these guys are coming from, though. So we'll start at the top. You got quarterback, and this is where I think you really can look at this. Redbird's got a great point on this too, is that you can tell that Heckendorf is coming from the staff that had a lot of SEC footprint ties. Almost all the QB offers are SEC footprint, which is exactly right. Andre Adams is Tennessee. Jameson Roberts is Alabama. Then you've got a couple guys from Georgia. Another guy from Alabama, Casey Myers from Alabama, Brody Campbell from Georgia, Ben Musser from Georgia. And in the lone non-SEC guy here is Brody Rudnicki from Folsom, California. So, which is partly in the territory. That's in the old. That's the Pacific Coast is generally speaking kind of Washington State territory. So that could be a kind of a holdover from that as well. But this is the last. I believe the last quarterback from Georgia that Iowa State was ever really involved with was Zeb Noland. Before that, I could not tell you when the last quarterback from Georgia or Alabama or anything like that in that area. I couldn't tell you the last time that they were involved in any of that. And you can absolutely tie a lot of that back to the new staff, like you said with Heckendorf, and then the new offensive line coach whose name is escaping me right now, but the new offensive line coach who just came from Auburn. Those guys both have ties down in SEC country, so you can see that right there in the quarterback spot. We go to running back. I want to come back to Landon Williams-Callis, but you got Texas, Arizona, and then Isaiah Hansen from Iowa. I remember watching Isaiah I think I was in a hotel. This was the night before an Iowa State game. They were staying because it was an early kick. So sometimes on early kicks, because I live over in Eastern Iowa, we go out the night before and we stay in Marshalltown or Nevada or something like that, just to have an easier drive in the morning. And I remember we were watching. I think we were watching. It was a Newton. Was it? I don't remember. It was I don't know. It was Newton and somebody. Newton in Marshalltown or something like that. I can't remember now. But I remember watching the running back for Newton, Isaiah Hansen. I was like, this kid's a nice little player. So I don't think this guy will pan. I don't know if he pans out the way Abu Sama did, where he's very clearly a good athlete, potentially an NFL level athlete, all this. I don't know if he's there, but it's always good to have local kids, and he's got clear talent when you watch him on tape. So even if 247 hasn't picked up on him yet, I do think this is a worthwhile name to watch. I don't know if he's going to be a star at Iowa State or anything like that, but good name there. But you got Glendale, Arizona, so there's your tie back there with Jimmy back there in the Phoenix metro area. Zeb actually got a shout out by O-line coach Thornton during his media availability. Apparently Thornton and Zeb's dad have a connection. Yeah, because I think that was, I remember listening to that too, because I think that was how Thornton even found out about Iowa State. And I don't know if it was kind of funny because he was presenting the Zeb Noland thing as though we may not know who Zeb Noland is, which was kind of funny. But yeah, no, I looking at the running, a couple running backs there from Texas. And I know my good friend Marchie Murdoch has been saying for years that Iowa State needs to go back to recruiting Texas because Texas has more speed than anywhere else. And I think that's it is to a certain, it's a video game, but it is reflected in College Football 26 too. Generally speaking, the fastest prospects in the game are going to come out of Texas, and specifically South Texas. And so Texas, generally speaking, produces some of the fastest players in the country, and that's where Iowa State, wants to. I think they want to go try to find more skilled players there because I think they've been able to establish more of a reputation now. The Paul Rhodes staff was able to get some guys out of Texas. They were they were unsung, diamonds in the rough. Hakeem Butler, who was a 2-star guy coming out of high school, that kind of player. But they were able to find good players out of Texas. But now Iowa State has a little bit more of a national brand that they can sell. You might be able to get a higher quality player out of Texas, and where that comes in, we'll see what it amounts to. But Landon Williams-Callis is a really, really high level running back. If you look at his offer list it's everybody. It's anybody that matters. It's pretty much all of FBS has offered Landon Williams-Callis. I don't know what Iowa State's odds are of getting him. He's a full-on 5-star recruit, one of the best running backs in the country. They offered it. I'm interested in it because he's been a huge prospect his whole, for his entire high school career. If I remember correct, I'm gonna see if I can find it. His high school stats are insane. See if they actually have him on here. Yeah, so last year he ran for 2,100 yards and 43 touchdowns on 9 yards a carry. Caught 20 passes for another couple hundred yards. Ran for 1,946 and 23 touchdowns the year before that. Runs a 10.65 in the 100. I mean, this cat's good. He's small, obviously 5'7.5", but he's really, really good. If Iowa State had literally no chance at this, I don't know why you bother even like reaching out at this point, at this point in the cycle where, he's a junior now. But he's a premier prospect that's had attention from college coaches for years at this point. So it's not like you're finding him before anybody else gets to him. The Blue Bloods already found him. So, like I said, I don't know if there's anything real here, and maybe they're just kind of doing the service of like, hey, we want to reach out just to make sure just to get our names in the hat type of thing, and just to show that we can, that we're willing to target these high level players. But Landon Williams-Callis he would immediately be probably the best. He would be the best prospect to sign with Iowa State, at least since Alan Lazard. And you could probably make a pretty good case that he is a better signee than Alan Lazard. I mean, 247 only has him at 93, but their composite has him at a 5-star, full on 5-star. So he would be the best signee in Iowa State history. I remember when I originally texted Marchie about this, because he coaches high school down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I texted him that Iowa State had offered Landon Williams-Callis, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that guy," and because he's like, obviously Texas high school football has a number of like legendary players at this point, but he is building himself a bit of a mythology around him in the state of Texas. So I don't know if Iowa State's got a shot at it, but I just think it's interesting that they offered him at this point already, just given that they're by far not the first dog at the bowl. Go over to wide receiver. We still got Ohio here, but we've got Arizona, Texas. They're still hanging around in the immediate area, and they've got Oak Park, which is Kansas City, and then you got Kansas City, St. Louis, Indiana, but they're sticking. They've got ties where they want them to be. Arizona and Texas, and that's that. I would say it's obviously had success down in Arizona finding guys, but I really like this staff's re-emphasis on recruiting Texas, because that is just, you could argue that Georgia produces a higher end like the top end of Georgia is maybe better than just slightly better than the top end of Texas, but in terms of just depth across the state and the number of guys that are FBS quality players in Texas, if you're not recruiting Texas, you are actively missing out. Like you are leaving money on the table if you are not actively recruiting Texas. So really happy to see this re-emphasis here, and they're shooting at some like prospects that Iowa State has typically gone after, in the high 80s here. Ribber says Lane from Houston has an OV on the books, so that would be Braylon Lane right here from CE King. 6'2", $185. Got offers from Kentucky, Kansas, Houston, Arkansas, Iowa State, Auburn, Oklahoma State, TCU, A&M. He's got a pretty good little offer list here. And you said, I think Sherman was already recruiting him to Houston. Yeah. So we've already got some connections there. You've got a Houston connection as well there, which is nice, because Houston itself cranks out a lot of Division I prospects. Tight end, you've got a couple decent rated prospects here, one from South Dakota, another one from Arizona. Obviously, anytime you see Arizona on this list, you can immediately assume it's a Jimmy Rogers connection, which is obviously nice to have an immediate connection the uh, to the head coach. Obviously, Illinois. Then you got another Tennessee prospect here. So this is going to go back to probably in tight end spot. I'm guessing this is probably going back to either Thornton or Heckendorf. So then you got another North Dakota here, which the Dakotas are going to go back to this whole staff from back from their South Dakota State days. And then you got some SEC ties, you got the Houston ties, all that. Only four offensive linemen been offered so far out of Michigan, Kansas. You got a local kid here out of Rock Valley, Illinois. So they're sticking in the upper Midwest here for their offensive linemen, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, this part of the country doesn't produce a ton of high level talent, but most of the highest level of talent it typically produces is on the lines, specifically the offensive line, and then at linebacker. That's where this state has typically produced its best talent, or in this part of the country has typically produced its best talent is kind of in the blue collar positions. Or sorry, offensive tackle here, I should say. Offensive line, they've got a few more of these. I would be curious to see what happens with Will Slagle. He has not committed to Penn State yet. He's a big, he grew up an Iowa State fan, committed to Iowa State in the tailgate lots. There's that whole thing. We did just see a video of him really recently, last week, of him lifting at his high school, and he was wearing an Iowa State shirt. So, maybe it's that's just the shirt he was wearing. I don't know. But what I do know is that he's a very, very good prospect. He's a local kid that grew up an Iowa State fan. And I really, really would love to see this staff be able to get him. And because keeping him would feel that would just feel like a massive win. After this whole, after this offseason with Matt Campbell taking all those guys out of the recruiting class, all the guys from Omaha, and a few of the guys from Iowa as well, taking just a huge chunk of that recruiting class, a huge chunk of them. And but Will Slagle did not flip. He just decommitted while the staff was getting acquainted. I hope that they've made him one of their biggest priorities for the class. If they haven't, I'll be a little disappointed, because he's a very good, very, very good prospect. Kid's built like an ox, and you want to keep a kid like that, because that's a prospect that before Matt Campbell got here, that's a prospect that goes to Iowa 10 times out of 10. And you've got a chance that he grew up an Iowa State fan. This is where Will Slagle is what pays off when you finally make your program relevant. Because he's a 17, 18-year-old kid, pretty much his entire conscious life, from being 7, 8 years old, which is where he's probably really maybe starts paying attention and really remembers things. Virtually his entire conscious existence, he's known Iowa State football to be good. So you need to capitalize on that, so that way the inroads that Iowa State made within, made between the Mississippi, the Mississippi and the Missouri, the inroads that Iowa State made in state, you need to build on those and not let those fall by the wayside. Because there's a bunch of kids that are they're getting into high school now that have really only ever known Iowa State to be good at football. So you need to capitalize on that. And Will Slagle is the first time you can really do that and say, this is a Cyclone fan that was homegrown because of the success that you had the last decade. And they need to keep working on that. And so Thornton recruited him at Auburn too. So Thornton already knows him, and hopefully that helps. But we'll see with that. They're staying in Kansas. You got a couple Kansas guys here. You got Wisconsin. Looks like teammates. Oh yeah, brothers Hunter and Reese Mallinger from Sussex, Wisconsin. You've got Nebraska kid here, Illinois. So they're staying upper Midwest for their lines. And a lot of these are going to be, these are all you know, I'm sure that they've had already talked to a lot of these guys at Washington State, but mainly because of their ties back from South Dakota State, because this is prime South Dakota State recruiting territory as well. So, some of these guys that they got on early for South Dakota State now have risen through the rankings and now are recognized as being really good prospects, and now they can capitalize on them when you can sell them a Big 12 football program. So that's a big deal. Now we get to the defensive side of the ball here, and we see some more. We see some new. This is the first time we really see some Washington State kind of DNA and where the offers are coming from. Troy Malo from Denver. Iowa State does not typically get a lot out of Denver. Now, granted, they did get Miles Purchase and Bo Freeler out of Colorado, but generally speaking, Iowa State does not recruit the West very much outside of going to California here and there. Iowa State does not typically recruit West very often. So, it's worth noting that they went, and he's a decent little prospect too. I'm kind of curious what his offers look like. Arizona State, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas. He's got a Michigan offer, Michigan State. He's got an Oklahoma offer, Utah. He's got a very, very nice offer list. Love going after a kid like that especially because Iowa State early on, just because they had to take so many players in the transfer portal. The next couple classes, as far as freshman classes go, Iowa State's going to have a lot of playing time to offer some of these positions. Now, there's a couple that you probably don't have a lot of early playing time, like quarterback. You probably don't have a lot of early playing time that you can offer because you've got it taken care of for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And then you've already got, you got your quarterback from this class, Hudson Curland, who, we did a review on him, whatever it was, a couple months ago or a month ago, whenever he committed. And I really like him. He's got a lot. He's got a lot of natural arm talent that he can rely on. He needs to work on his footwork and things like that. But one off season with a good quarterback coach, and I think Hudson Curland has a very, very high ceiling. And Iowa State. So I think that's the quarterback they don't have a lot to talk about. But I think running back they can potentially have some early playing time available for these 27 guys. Because Aiden Flora will graduate. I think next year he graduates because I think he's a junior right now. And you did grab a couple. You got a couple running backs in the freshman transfer, or not transfer class, but the freshman class. But running back, you take one or two every year, and I would say it's not like right now, anyways. I don't know that there's a Breece Hall or a Dave Montgomery on the roster that's just going to sit there and bury people for a couple years. I don't know if that there's a guy on the roster right now that's like that. I would love if River Peppers became a guy like that, but we're also, I don't know that we're ever going to really see a true bell cow like those two were again. Maybe, I guess. I mean, pro style offenses don't really utilize the bell cow approach. I mean, even when, the Lions this past year, they have a 2-headed running back with David and Jahmyr Gibbs. And, the bell cow running back it's not dead, but it's not nearly as popular as it used to be. So I think they've got a lot of snaps coming up that they can offer running backs, especially, which could be the reason that you go after such a highly rated guy at the running back position. Because even if he's got blue blood offers, he's probably going to be sitting behind somebody at a blue blood. Whereas, if he comes to Iowa State, he may just be the guy day one and they just roll with it because he's that good. So they can sell him on that as you are going to have an opportunity to be the dude on day one. So, we'll see. That's it. Some guys really, really care about that. Some guys, they want to just chase the NIL dollars, which is fine. And some guys, they want to just go to the prestigious programs, whatever it is. But obviously, we'll have playing time to offer a lot of these. Wide receiver definitely will have playing time to offer. At best, they've got a lot of unproven names. Can a guy like Dominic Overby, make the jump this season and learn how to catch a football? And because I mean, he's got the physical tools, all the physical tools are obviously there. So, there's a lot of unproven. I think there's there's raw talent in the room, but right now it's just raw talent. It needs to develop. So, wide receiver will have tons and tons of snaps. Defensive line will be, they're in a they're in a pretty good spot right now, but I think you'll have a spots, especially on the interior, to offer going forward. Linebacker, you've got good young talent there, so you maybe not as immediate there. The secondary absolutely will have openings as well. So I mean, obviously it's got tons and tons of playing time to offer these guys. That for like Troy in Oklahoma or at Utah or something like that, they may not be able to offer him that. And at 6'3", 238, I mean, he's got size right away. He's got the size right away to be able to do what he needs to do. Couple Cans guy, another guy here from Washington, Ty Tautolo. Another thing you don't really see at Iowa State, you don't see the Polynesian players at Iowa State very often. And it'd be nice if they were able to, at the staff with Washington State was able to get inroads in different parts of the country, where you can have access to just a different kind of player than Iowa State's typically had. This guy's name is Uhila Wolfgram, defensive end out of Spanish Fork, Utah. Utah, Washington, Colorado. That's Pac-12 territory. That's Pac-12 recruiting territory. So this kind of stuff. Those are connections from Washington State. So you can really see through this whole thing. You can see DNA from. I mean, you can look at all of these pieces and say, this is where this connection is. This is where this connection is. This is where this connection is. We can see the Houston connections. We can see the Arizona connections. We can see the SEC territory connections. We can see where the Pac-12 area we can see where that came from. We can see where the Dakotas and Minnesota and stuff like that. We can see where those are coming from. So it's kind of fun to follow this because we get so used to the last staff pretty much just hit the Rust Belt. So they just hit Iowa over to Ohio, and then up to Michigan a little bit, up to Wisconsin, a little bit up in Minnesota, and the Kansas City area. They pretty much the recruiting area was kind of shaped like a dick, just up here and then straight east with the shaft. But sorry, that's a CF After Dark way to describe that. But that's kind of what it was. But this staff is reaching into all sorts of different kinds of the country. They're really leveraging their connections to different geographic areas. And I'm really excited for how they're going to approach this too, because we just got used to how Matt Campbell and staff recruits these guys, and they're just this staff is recruiting a different kind of player in a different part of the country, and it's fun to follow. It's something new. Caleb Jordan right here. You got another Chandler, Arizona, so that's another Jimmy Rogers connection down there. Defensive line. There's Florida. There's Texas. Like I said, we've gotten some out of Florida, but the Texas stuff is where we can really lean into this we can really lean into our new connections down there. Dwayne Jones is currently a Kansas State commit. I would assume they think they can flip him if they've decided to offer him. I would assume they think they can flip him, but not entirely sure exactly. But go to linebacker, Minnesota, Arkansas, Ohio, Texas. I'm curious. I want to look at a couple of these guys' tape because 6'2", obviously high school linebackers typically aren't, they're typically a little undersized, but with a 4.25, your linebackers need to be quick. They need to have good lateral movement. They need to have good speed because they've got a lot more area to cover. And you're expecting them to chase runs that have gotten bounced to the outside. If it's to the weak side away from your nickel corner. So in general, your 4.25, your linebackers are going to be undersized. So if you look at these, you get 6'2", 200, 205, 190, 200. When they get to college, they'll be in that 220, 230-ish range, just because you still need more beef than that. I mean, you can't be a 190-pound linebacker in the Big 12. That's just not going to work. But you can be a 220-pound linebacker, 225-pound linebacker in the Big 12 as long as you can tackle and you can play physically. As long as you can be physical with that size. 225 at linebacker can play in the Big 12. So we can already see the different kinds of players that they're recruiting here. The Minnesota kid, yeah. So the Minnesota kid, Blake Benton, he was recruited by the last staff. He's got a crystal ball to Penn State. You'd love to be able to stick around to keep him, but I don't know if they're going to be able to. He's got an Iowa shirt on in his picture, and he's got a crystal ball to Penn State. It's not great, not looking great for Iowa State, but we'll see. Obviously, this is still early in the recruiting cycle. They've got Junior Day coming up here in a little while, and I think it's in April. No, it's towards the end of May. They've got a Junior Day. They've got camps during early in the summer that they'll offer a lot more guys there where they can get guys to come to Iowa State, and develop some of those relationships too. So when those camps all happen, you're going to see a lot more offers come out, especially for 2027 and 2028. So, but we go back to the secondary. You got another high-level prospect here, Blake Jenkins out of Katy, Texas. Oklahoma, you got Florida, and you got Texas, and then Oklahoma, and another Texas. They're clearly. It's interesting that the position groups do seem to be fairly well. Like, you can see where they want to try to find speed, because that's where you're going to look in the Oklahoma, Texas type area. That's where you're going to find your speed. So you can see that at the speed positions, running back, receiver, and the secondary, they're really focusing in on that part of the country. And when you got the offensive and defensive line, the linebackers, you're focusing in on the upper Midwest. That's, where those kids come from. So, and I know this is like pointing out stuff that sounds obvious. But recruiting's a weird deal, and and we have a lot of data that goes back to show that just certain parts of the country produce these kinds of players. Quarterbacks pretty much invariably, the best quarterbacks pretty much always come from either Texas or they come from California, Southern California specifically. Really in anywhere along the coast, from anywhere between the Bay Area and Los Angeles, which is obviously a large area, but California and Central Texas, especially like Houston, DFW, those two areas produce, like by far the best quarterbacks in the country. As far as just the lineage of quarterbacks from those areas is pretty outrageous. But then you get receivers coming from Texas or Georgia. You've got some of the best linebackers in the country coming from, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, stuff like that. You've got defensive backs and receivers, especially coming from Florida. Offensive line can come from a lot of places. But obviously the upper Midwest cranks out a lot of offensive linemen. So yeah, that's exactly right. DBs, I don't think it would be controversial to say that Florida, generally speaking, produces the best defensive backs in the country. And that's where you get Jontez Williams as a Florida kid. They've gotten lots of guys out of Florida. TJ Tampa, obviously, we've had success down there. You're probably going to continue to have success down there. So, it's not shocking to see them go after these guys in parts of the country that have a legacy of producing these. It's the last staff did take. They took pride in finding diamonds in the rough, which is good. If Iowa State's just not going to be able to wrangle in tons and tons of blue chip prospects, and I think this coaching staff realizes that too. But I think they were this staff, the last staff. I think they really. I think the last staff, maybe almost to a fault, they trust like their guys. If Matt Campbell knows them or someone on the staff knows them, they will give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think this was fairly easily represented. This is fairly easily represented in the specialist situation, especially with kicker. Because most anybody, pretty much anybody that knows, that watches this show knows that there's pretty much there are two major services that rank kickers and punters and long snappers. There's Cole's kicking, so it's Jamie Cole, and then you've got Chris Saylor. Those are kind of the main two. I mean, there are other services that help rank those, and that kind of train these guys. There are others, but Chris Saylor and Jamie Cole are kind of the big two as far as kickers, punters, and long snappers. And for a number of years, I did a podcast with Cole Netton, former Iowa State kicker, and he was he was a Cole's kicking guy. Jamie Cole's an Iowa State grad. He's still Jamie Cole still lives lives around central Iowa, even though they do camps all over the place. But there's bias involved here, but Cole was adamant that Jamie Cole, or that Cole Netton was adamant that Jamie Cole, he does the best job of evaluating and ranking these guys. Campbell's staff very clearly, if you go back and look at rankings and just kind of who was which players were associated with which coach. Campbell's staff was very clearly they were Chris Saylor loyalists. They basically always went with Chris Saylor guys. And we saw that didn't always work out. There was a couple, if you think of Iowa State's like good kickers that they had at Iowa State. Now they've had a couple good punters. Tyler Perkins was very good, to his credit. But if you look at like freshman kickers they brought in, obviously Kyle Conradi, sure, yes, but the best kickers they had were mostly transfers. If you go back to like Garrett Owens, then you go to Andrew Mevis. Those guys were transfers in. They weren't freshman recruits. Iowa State's freshman punters and kickers that came from Chris Saylor and long snappers for that matter didn't really pan out. But the staff went with those guys, Jace Gilbert. The staff went with those guys because they were Chris Saylor loyalists. Now, who this staff is loyal to for their specialists, I don't know. But for better or worse, and which is it was kind of either way, the staff's loyalties to different parts of the country, to different loyalty to their way of doing things. It helped them in some ways because it gave them a foundation to build on, but it also held them back in other ways, I think. And so we didn't see that staff go look for certain players in the part of the country where they needed to look for them. And this current staff, Jimmy Rogers' staff, is doing that in ways that the last staff didn't. So they're not, this staff is not just trying to, just do what the last staff did and just, keep going with it. They're doing things their own way, which is great. I think a change of pace is absolutely can be beneficial here. Obviously you are recruiting for a completely different defensive scheme. You could maybe argue that the offense, while it will look a little different potentially, formations wise, it will still largely try to accomplish the same things for the most part. But the defensive scheme is completely different, and you got to have completely different players. And it's been really interesting so far to watch the early returns of the types of guys that this staff is going to recruit for the defense. And I think they're taking some shots on some guys. They're getting aggressive in certain places. And especially at certain position groups where they know they're going to need a dude. And we're going to keep an eye on it. It's interesting. It's early. Once we get a firmer idea of where some of these guys are going to go and like which ones have a good shot, which ones Iowa State has a good shot at, we'll dig into more, film wise. And especially if there's a commit, we'll look through some film as well. But It's an interesting start. I like some of the names. I like where the areas of this country the staff is going to start on this class, and we will keep an eye on it going forward. Um, there's obviously not a lot going on right now, so if you guys have any questions you want answered, absolutely throw them in the chat right now. We're more than happy to answer those. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left or so when I don't need to necessarily. Did I miss the athletes at the bottom? Oh yes. So safety. You got a couple. You got a guy from Georgia, a couple from Texas, Nebraska. You got a couple guys from Georgia, a couple from Texas. Tishon Poole is he's a 4-star guy. Why Liebentrit from Omaha. So maybe trying to make some more inroads back into the Omaha area. I'd be curious to see what Tishon Poole looks like. What kind of shot we've got at him, because he's a high 4-star. I mean, he's got Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Georgia. This staff, despite being new to the school, is taking some shots at some really high level players. This is a full on. This is a blue chip. This is a blue blood caliber player. We'll see what kind of shot Iowa State has at this, but again, they're going to have playing time to offer these guys. What does the NIL situation look like? Do they have enough NIL available to land a player like this, or to land a Tishon Poole, or to land a or to land a Landon Williams Callis? Do they have the firepower NIL wise to land these guys? Who knows? Both of those guys are probably NFL guys, so you can maybe make the argument to them that you're going to make this money down the road pretty much no matter what. As long as you show up and do your thing, you're going to make the money down the road, no matter what. So we'll see. If you want to go like a state-by-state breakdown here, Texas leads the way with 11 offers. 6 from Illinois, 5 from Arizona, 5 from Kansas, and then 4 from Georgia, Iowa, Ohio. And then you've got, just a smattering of other ones from other places. But, Texas right there. I mean, you get, getting a couple guys, getting the coach from Houston, helps that out. And this, the staff is reprioritizing one of the best states in the country to pull recruits from, which is great. It's great to see. If you want to go, if you would go back a couple of years, let's go back to the 2025 class, since that was the last one that Iowa State had that Iowa State went off. It also should be noted that this staff has so far offered significantly fewer players than the last staff. The last staff made a habit of offering fucking everybody. They offered everyone and their mom. 45 offers to Florida, 18 to Illinois, 16 to Missouri, 11 in Utah. I mean, they offered everyone. But still only 5, the staff that offered everybody only offered 5 kids from Texas. Go back to 2024. Tons and tons of Florida offers, 57. Still only 11 in Texas. I mean, it's good to it's good to offer Iowa and Illinois. That's great. There's talent in those states. You should offer. All of the best players in Iowa, they should offer and do all that. But if you don't have at least as many Texas offers as you do Iowa, if not more, you're probably doing something wrong. You're leaving money on the table. And that's not a disrespect to the state of Iowa, but it is. But Texas as a state is like 20 times, it's like 10 to 15 times larger than Iowa, and has a history of producing tons and tons and tons of talent. Here, 53 offers in Florida, 15 in Iowa, only 13 in Texas. They did not prioritize Texas the way they could have. And maybe could have landed some other, players that could have made a difference in some games. Well, we go to the 2027 class, and who is the priority so far? Texas. Yeah, Arizona, Georgia, Iowa. They're offering the places that are producing talent, which is great to see. I think just the one from California right now, but new recruiting areas. And it's great to see. Iowa State will be in play for more recruits in the SEC territory, which is really exciting because There's a reason that SEC schools typically have more talent than most other schools, and that's because the South produces a lot of talent. They just do. You know, Louisiana and Texas and Atlanta and Florida, South Florida especially, the Carolinas produce tons of talent. Like, you got to go where the talent is, and you can get different kinds of players in different parts of the country, but the staff has done a good job reprioritizing and going where the talent is, basically. So now we will move on. If anybody's got any questions I want me to answer, I can absolutely do that. No, I realize that it's February. It's kind of dry right now. There's not a lot going on. The football team has had practices, but they're closed door, so we don't really know what's going on or anything like that. The word around town is that they're happy so far with what they've seen, which is nothing. Like, you're at this point in the year where it's like there's so little like football happening that like it's pretty much impossible to be like super jazzed about like, oh man, we're not even in spring practice where you can say like, oh man, the defense is beating up the offense, or man, the offense was really able to move the ball on the defense and stuff like that. Like, we're in February workouts right now. So, but for what it's worth, which is almost nothing, the word around town is that the staff is currently pretty happy with where the team's at. I don't know if that's just in terms of like a physical spot or if it's just like a team building spot. Oh yeah, so there you have four more offers from Texas today that aren't even listed than 247. So they're really going after Texas, and I love to see that. Because I obviously it's pulled good players out of Texas before, so I'd like to keep rolling with that. So, all right, what we'll do is I won't go over Don Orange's quotes comments today. What we'll do is after the combine, we'll probably talk about it a little bit, see how he does, see kind of where that moves him projection wise for the draft. And we'll take a look in general at all of Iowa State's draft prospects. Just kind of see where they're going to end up being at, but we'll let Dom go through the whole process first and get his numbers up there and all that. So I think we'll probably wrap up for this week, though. Appreciate everybody for watching. Appreciate all the comments, especially Redbird, who's even more of a recruiting junkie than I am. So I appreciate your contributions as well. But everybody, appreciate you watching. Appreciate you tuning in. Conversation's always good. We will be back again next week, and we'll probably be talking a little bit of scouting combine, a little bit of maybe we'll project some depth charts, stuff like that. So everybody have a great rest of your week. Enjoyed the Texas Tech game this weekend for basketball. The women have senior night tonight, so I believe actually the game's probably going on right now. So everybody, thank you for watching this episode of Iowa State Cyclones live here on the Voice of College Football Network. We'll see you guys again next Tuesday. I had to move it this week because of the basketball game this week, but next Tuesday we'll be back with another episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys then.